Hi. I'm at the movie theater right now, waiting to see the new big film that no one has ever talked about for some reason. Heck, it seems like not even the theater itself knows what it's about the show. At first, I wasn't really interested in the movie, mainly because I haven't really heard anything about it, though not for trying. But I eventually found out that it's based on a video game, and, well, I just had to see it for myself. It feels more like a duty than a privilege at this point. Though, that did get me thinking about movies based on video games in general, and what a potential future for the subgenre could be, as honestly, there's a ton of potential to make some pretty great films. Or shows, I guess. Video games and movies have always had a weird relationship. For a pretty long time, the two have never really been together, per se. While you would occasionally get some movie or show tie-in games with some interesting results, films that were based on video games were kind of a rarity. But as of late, we've been seeing a sort of resurgence of these kinds of films, as well as episodic series. And no, I don't mean the live-action 1993 Mario Bros. Movie, and I don't want to think about it because every time I do, the insomnia kicks in. Sonic, Five Nights at Freddy's, Mario, The Last of Us, League of Legends, they've all gotten or are getting a movie or show adaptation, and with generally high praise from critics and fans alike. Safe to say, it's been a pretty exciting few years for video games, and there's no doubt in my mind that we're going to be seeing an influx of video game-based films. But what video games exactly should get on the big screen? There are a lot of potential candidates, but making a movie can be a pretty big risk, so you can't just adapt any old franchise to a 2-hour and 30-minute advertisement and expect to make it big. And hey, the movie isn't going to be starting for a while, and I am deathly afraid of making small talk with the cashier, so in the meantime, let's talk about what games I would like to see on the big screen. Before we get into it though, I would like to set up a few rules and clarifications so we're all on the same page. First off, the franchise should be at least relatively popular around the world. That doesn't mean they need to be world-renowned games that make billions every Tuesday, but don't expect me to mention anything like, I don't know, Dr. Muto. Second, when it comes to actually making a movie, there's gonna be a lot of things to worry about, like how long is the movie gonna be? Is it gonna retell the game's story or have its own unique plot? Would an episodic series have an overarching story, or would each episode exist in a vacuum? What about original game franchises that are based on films, like the Epic Mickey games? And, look, I'm a random nerd who likes talking about video games, not a director. I'll leave the actual professionals to worry about the specifics. This video is just going to cover my opinions on the topic. Oh, and it goes without saying, but no franchises that already have any kind of movie or show, at least as of recent. And just one more thing. From now on, when I say movie, just assume that it means cinema in general, including films, episodic shows, etc. Alright, let's get to it. Yeah, I think it's best if we get the most obvious stuff out of the way and move on from there. Even though I'm personally not a big fan of the franchise, I have to say, it would be more surprising if Nintendo didn't make an action movie in the Zelda universe. The story, the setting, the characters, pretty much anything that would make a great film is in these games, and considering just how well the Mario movie, the new one, and to a much lesser extent the Detective Pikachu movie went, there's no doubt in my mind that Nintendo is anywhere close to stopping the movie train. Just please let DreamWorks manage it. Look, the Mario movie was beautiful, and Illumination is an incredible studio. But come on! Have you ever witnessed the action scenes in pretty much any DreamWorks film? They're basically destined to make a movie on this franchise. If it wasn't for the Mario movie, I would have insisted that I want Nintendo to avoid using Hollywood superstars just because they're popular. But honestly, everyone in that movie did such a good job, I really don't think I'd be as worried about that as much here. Seriously, I really do think that everyone there was great. While we're still comparing the Mario movie, I think it's important to have a Zelda movie not be just for fans of the series. Like, if you weren't into Mario, or really Nintendo in general, you probably would have thought that the Mario movie was just okay. I'd like a Zelda movie to be enjoyable by everyone, even if you're like me and barely know anything about the franchise, especially with how story-centered the series is compared to Mario. Oh, and don't make it live action, please. I really do not want another uncanny Detective Pikachu moment. Cinematic shorts in Team Fortress 2 have always been a strange case to. Okay, no, I'm not doing that bit. Yeah, I will admit, TF2 is in a bit of a gray area when it comes to the rules I set up earlier, considering the official SFM shorts, and honestly, expiration date may as well be a feature film. But ignoring those, TF2 has such a genuinely insane yet interesting story, it would feel criminal not to include this. Heck, a full-on movie doesn't even need to be set in the TF2 universe. I mean, not too recently did people start finding out about the cancelled episodic series, where the characters were just regular people transported into the game world. It's a pretty interesting subject, and Tofinator made a pretty good video covering it. For a film set in the TF2 universe itself? Oh my god, where do I even begin? The game's been kind of left on an indefinite cliffhanger for years now, and what we've been left with is a really good comic series that just doesn't have an actual ending so far. If we don't end up getting a comic, but there is still the chance of concluding the story, an SFM movie would be super cool, especially if Val could get all the original voice actors back in. If that doesn't happen, then we can still get cinematic adaptations of the previous comics. You might say that having a movie set in the TF2 universe is somewhat pointless, considering the comics already do the job. Manga gets adapted into anime shows all the time. What would make TF2 any different? Modern XCOM's premise and story are kind of weird, as since XCOM 2, they've never really gotten that much coverage, which I think is a huge missed opportunity. In the event that we don't get an XCOM 3, which is totally not going to happen, and the series is definitely not going to be stuck in a perpetual cliffhanger on top of a cliffhanger, I'd really like to see the story of the aliens in particular. Even though we know why exactly the aliens decided to conquer Earth, there are still quite a lot of mysteries that just haven't been answered, even in the series' latest game, Chimera Squad, and I think an episodic series could really delve into the origins and desires of not just the Elders, but also all the other alien races that they took under their wing. Also, I'd really like to see the horror element of the series be expanded upon. Whether intentionally or not, the original UFO Defense game had an amazing atmosphere with how great the sound and alien designs were. To this day, I still get anxious when I hear distant aliens scampering around the metal floor of crashed UFOs, just wondering where they could possibly be hiding. The game's reboot in 2012 with Enemy Unknown did have a bit of horror, but the more cartoony art style plus the addition of combat music made it feel a lot more action-oriented, although the tutorial in that game was still pretty damn terrifying. But hey, maybe everything I just talked about is going to be in XCOM 3, which is absolutely going to happen, and 2K is without a doubt going to have big news for XCOM, considering the original game's 30th anniversary in 2024, and I am not coping, I am not tired of waiting 6 years for a game that may as well not come out, I am perfectly healthy. Okay, real talk for a second. Would there be any objections for a film or show based on Stardew Valley? Seriously, the game is practically an episodic show that you can play. I don't really know how to explain it, but playing this game always feels like I'm the protagonist of a farm-themed sitcom, only I'm the only one who decides how each episode plays out. Like, does anyone else feel this way, or is there something going on with me? It's hard for me to explain it properly, but all of the townsfolk feel so alive. They all feel like they can just exist, even if I never so much as acknowledge the fact that they do. For the most part, anyway. Even then, each character has such an interesting story that I feel can teach some really important lessons about people just in general. Why they do the things they do, I guess. Plus, you can always add some action into it with the mines, I guess. That would be kinda cool, probably. No, let's not include the mines. Here's a bit of a secret. I love Monster Prom. I don't really know how to properly explain just how important this game is to me, or really how awesome it is in general, because it's really hard to talk about a day sim in a way that's most interesting and doesn't get me yelled at by YouTube, because His games are very much not made for a young audience, but my god, they are amazing! They do such an amazing job at tackling difficult topics while also being one of the most hilarious things I've ever witnessed, and it would feel criminal not to include this in the list. Honestly, the format and writing already feels like an adult slice-of-life show to the point that I really don't think you'd even need to change it that much. Now, of course, the writing definitely is not going to be it for everyone, and if you're not a fan of overly cheesy adult humor like I tend to be, you're probably not going to like Monster Prom, whether as a show or visual novel. And, yeah, that's really all I can say about these games. Like I said, I'd rather be careful than try my luck at how far I can talk about a game like Monster Prom, but trust me, I would love to go on and on about how great they are, and would be as an episodic series, but I think that's not until another day. I've always found it interesting just how few fighting game movies there are. Although, considering what we have now is the Mortal Kombat movie and a Street Fighter animated series, yeah, I can kinda see why. Screw it. Third time's the charm. Guilty Gear's story is a lot like TF2's, where it's so insane, but also somehow just works, like, really well, in fact. Everything about it is so wild, but it all connects surprisingly well, for the most part. Honestly, even without considering the story, making a movie based on a fighting game is in itself a really cool idea. I mean, it's a genre that's centered entirely on high-octane combat. The problem is that pretty much every attempt at them has been lackluster at best. And come on, an anime-style fighting game with killer character designs and a refined story? Like, even if you aren't a fan of the franchise, how could you possibly pass up a movie like that? Oh, and make sure Potemkin is in it. My boy deserves to be more than just a side character. He needs it. Why do you have to have such horrible parents? Okay, look, I know that Overwatch has been kind of the butt of the joke recently, and justifiably so, but I think it's important for me to say first and foremost that anything I say positive about Overwatch, or really anything related to Blizzard in general, is directed entirely towards the developers and writers, rather than the higher-ups who actually make all the shitty decisions that have been plaguing the games for years at this point. I could go deeper into the developer versus higher-up debacle and why it's important to differentiate the two in any situation, but that's a rabbit hole that I don't want to go down today. This video is about video game movies after all, and not the morality of AAA game standards. I'll leave that to someone who is much more versed in that topic than me. Okay, now that we've gotten that out of the way, my god, I love this game's story and characters. Almost every single character, from their lore to their voice lines, even down to how they interact with the rest of the roster, is so well made. Ramatra is one of the best video game villains ever. Seriously. His story isn't even finished yet, and it's already such an amazing take on just how far someone can go to make the world a better place before the views become more radical and violent. Honestly, the entire story of the Omnics alone would be enough to make an entire movie out of. Everything about them as people, their cultures, and how they're discriminated against is such a well-made allegory for real-life discrimination, even if it definitely isn't a perfect one, but that's a topic for another day. The story itself is really damn good too. Even though I haven't been all that into the recent story, and I absolutely refuse to touch the PvE game mode with a 10-foot pole, from what I've seen, it's only been getting better, and a movie or episodic series would be the final touch on this gourmet cake. It's just a shame how the company that owns the cake just so happens to be Blizzard, and that's a fate I would not want to wish upon any dessert. Well, except for cheesecake, because that crap stinks. And that's it! All of the video game franchises that I think could make some pretty killer movie tie-ins. Like I said, this is completely hypothetical, and very much not something that should be taken at all seriously. But I would like to hear some of your opinions. I only know so many video games, so what do y'all think? What games do you think should have movie adaptation? I'd love to hear some of your thoughts in the comments. Oh, but not right now, because the movie's about to start. thanks for watching, subscribe if you liked what you saw, and I'll see you all soon. What? Oh, come on!